Nuli. I'm the Deputy Director of GIJN, the Global Investigative Journalism Network, and I will be your moderator today in this hybrid event, in person and online. So welcome, everyone. So as you know, together with you, we want to create a sustainable journalism partnership, a global forum for journalists, media, and sustainability researchers and entrepreneurs. Together, we want to develop knowledge and practice based on the relation between journalism and environmental, social, and economic sustainability. This event is organized by Fojo Media Institute, World Association of News Publishers, Wits Center for Journalism, the Global Investigative Journalism Network, Internews Earth Journalism Network, and the Global Forum for Media Development. We have a packed agenda today, so let me first present you Shasti Fosbury. She's the director of Fojo Media Institute. She is deeply rooted in the Swedish media industry. She has more than 25 years of experience from different newsrooms in print media. Besides working as editor-in-chief and publisher for various newspapers, she has also been on the board of the Swedish Media Publishers Association and headed the Association of Swedish Newsroom Leaders. So welcome.
Thank you very much, and a very warm and heartfelt welcome to all of you here in the room at Linnaeus University in Kalmar, and also to the many of you joining us online from so many different venues around the globe. I'm both happy, proud, and humble to stand in front of you here today, introducing this launch of the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. Happy because we are now starting the process of putting yet another layer on the cake that is quality journalism. I'm proud as director of Fojo to host this launch of this international partnership. And I'm humbled to speak to this crowd of extremely knowledgeable and experienced journalists, researchers, and media professionals. Today, we will listen to voices speaking on all categories of sustainability: environmental, social, and financial, and how journalism can play a part, not only in strengthening democracy, but also in holding power to account in matters regarding sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals, and to give hope. Working with sustainable journalism is not about being naive or not wanting to see the challenges, the crisis before our eyes. It's about informing how decisions and events today affect the future, and how almost everything happening is global, connecting the global with the local. Sustainable journalism is not about painting everything in gloomy colors, but neither is it about pretending nothing is wrong. No, it's about growing stubborn optimism. I like the thought of being a stubborn optimist, because things can be changed. And if not us, then who? And if not now, when? So let's do it. And again, a warm and heartfelt welcome.
Thank you very much for your words. So now let me introduce you to Lars. Lars Tallert is Head of Policy and International Development at Fojo Media Institute.
Thank you.
Sweden's representative to UNESCO's IPDC Intergovernmental Council. He has more than 30 years of experience in journalism and development cooperation. Okay, tell us all about this.
Thank you. Let me say a few words about this concept that we call sustainable journalism. And actually, you can say that here in this room and in the digital room, we embody the vision of what the Sustainable Journalism Partnership can be: a global network of journalists, educators, media developers, and entrepreneurs. Sustainable journalism. When I say sustainable journalism, about half of the people I meet think it's about environment, and climate. And the other half think it's about developing business models for the media. I say it's both. I see no contradiction between profit and sustainability. And without economic independence, there can be no editorial independence. And adding to that, remember that there are 3 dimensions of sustainability: environmental, economic, and social. So with these 3 dimensions in mind, the idea behind sustainable journalism is so simple, it can be defined in 2 questions. How can we make independent journalism more sustainably, not least financially sustainable? And how can we improve independent journalism's contribution to a sustainable society? We need to come up with answers to both of these questions because we are facing 2 concurrent sustainability crises. The sustainability crisis of society, climate change, poverty, gender inequality, armed conflicts, crumbling democracy, and the sustainability crisis of journalism, huge drops in advertising revenues, fierce competition from global social media companies, media capture, shrinking space for freedom of expression, disinformation, the public's declining trust in the media. Do you recognize the picture? We at the Sustainable Journalism Partnership believe that these 2 crises are intertwined. A sustainable society requires journalism that addresses the sustainability challenges, and the sustainability and continued relevance of journalism depends on its ability to do precisely that and meet that need. Based on this logic, we wish to see independent, financially sustainable journalism with enduring economic foundations that not only safeguards democracy, but also enables a sustainable society. Well, you may ask, doesn't all journalism contribute to sustainability? I wish this was the case, but research suggests that much of the journalism published today may even be counterproductive to sustainable societies. We need to rethink. Let me give you one practical example. So there are hundreds of possible entry points to sustainable journalism, but let me give you one example based on the understanding of human responses to climate change. This is what research suggests. Many people realize that climate change is for real, and that climate change is the result of human activity. But the typical conclusion that you would expect, we have a crisis, I need to do something, it's not what is happening. Instead, people seem to go almost straight from climate change is a hoax to there's nothing I can do, we're doomed. So if this is true, how do we as journalists, media managers, media developers, and researchers react to this? Let us start from the commercial point of view. We have a large potential audience to catch in a very narrow space of time, just as they have come to the insight that climate change is for real, and before they go to there's nothing I can do about it. This requires an elaborated marketing strategy. If we look at journalistic reporting, research suggests that news items that feature positive actions to stop climate change can make people change attitude and say, I want to learn more about this. I can also do something. But if we look at present news on climate change, it's primarily doomsday news. And when people take part of doomsday news, they seem to go even faster from climate change is a hoax to there's nothing I can do. And then we miss that narrow space we have to catch this large audience, both as devoted media users, and as potential paying subscribers. But then again, is this really related to journalism's role in society? Shouldn't we just publish whatever news that is relevant and of interest to the public and be neutral to the consequences? We have to rethink if we want to be relevant and profitable in the long run. And if we, as individuals and as organizations, want to contribute to a sustainable society. We, as the global media community, need to rise to the occasion because we can play a decisive role to turn things right. But to do this, we need to understand what kind of journalism our audiences need to make society sustainable. And we need to understand what kind of sustainable news that people are willing to pay for. And if we're going to keep the trust of our audiences, we need to do this without deserting from our path of publishing independent, truth-seeking, fact-based journalism. I believe that the people that promote constructive and solution-based journalism are on the right track. So you could even say that the Sustainable Journalism Partnership is taking constructive journalism one step further by connecting it to business models and focusing on sustainability. So why do we need a Sustainable Journalism Partnership? Because there is no other organization that connects all these various aspects of journalism, media business, and sustainability into one global network with the ambition to improve both profitability for journalism and journalism's contribution to sustainable societies. An organization where we can cross-pollinate ideas between people with boots on the ground, researchers, educators, and publishers from a holistic, multidimensional, and cross-sectoral point of view. We need to get out of our old silos. This is why we need a Sustainable Journalism Partnership. I admit that I may be on deep water. Maybe I don't have enough scientific evidence to back up all the things I claim. But this is why we need to work together. We need to come up with new insights and knowledge and turn this into practice, in research, in education, in business, and not least in journalistic reporting. And we need to share these insights with each other as we are in this together. And if we're not successful, we'll go down together. This is why we need the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. And this is why we need your contribution. So warmly welcome to the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. Let this be the moment, the very first step of a long journey together. I look forward to walk side by side with all of you until we one day make both independent journalism and society sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. Let me ask you two follow-up questions before we continue with our pack agenda. So first, how did you come up with this idea? Tell us a little bit about the origins of this.
It's an interesting story because we were discussing at the Fojo Media Institute, how could we possibly connect better with environment? We had some ideas about environmental sensitive journalism and so on. And then someone said, what about sustainable journalism? Could that be a concept? And we discussed that. And then we started to Google and we realized that there's one person in this room who's sitting there, Peter Bergles, professor at Jönköping University, who has actually written a book about sustainable journalism, thinking in exactly the same lines as we have. And then we have the Constructive Institute in Denmark also thinking very much in the same lines. So that was kind of the start when we realized that we are not the only ones. And now, prior to this, we found a young woman in Canada who issues a Sustainability X magazine with the exact same thinking. So maybe it's in the air.
And, you know, sometimes it's a little difficult to grasp this concept, or it can get very theoretical. So what do you tell us what's next, and such concrete things like how do you become a member of the partnership, or what's in the plans? I know we will have breakout rooms later. We have a lot of presentations, so we will have examples, but tell us a little bit more about what's next and how can someone become a member?
Well, it's an interesting launch because we will constitute the NGO, it's a Sustainable Journalism Partnership, tomorrow. So it's not yet there, but it will be there tomorrow. And then we will send out to everyone who is in this conference forms so you can become members. And what do you need to become a member? Well, you need to want to contribute to a sustainable society. You must be engaged in journalism or sustainability or both. You must believe in the importance of independent journalism to democracy. You must strive to be financially independent if you're an organization. So tomorrow we will constitute the organization, and then you're all very welcome to apply.
Thank you. Okay, so keep an eye online for more information. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you, Gabby.
And now we will have the first one of many video greetings, this time from the UN, Ulrika Moder.
Sustainable Journalist Partnership. What a great idea and what a good initiative. Congratulations. My name is Ulrika Moder. I represent United Nations Development Program, and as we work across the world in 170 countries, we see the importance of independent journalism to make sure that decision makers can be held accountable, to see to that we can promote democracy, rule of law in a world where this is actually being challenged, but also to see that we can come forward with solutions, with great ideas that can make this world a better place for people and for planet. So congratulations to this very important initiative.
Great. And now we will have a presentation online. Let me welcome Lotta Edlin. She's the editorial director and head of sustainability at Bonnier News, the largest media group in the Nordic countries. She has had several editor and management roles, such as editor-in-chief for the Swedish business daily Dagens Industri. She's a member of the board of Swedish Newspapers Association and the International News Media Association. So Lotta, welcome. We are all ears.
Hi, Gabriella and Lars and Kersti and everyone. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes. We can hear,
Great.
We can see you.
I am so happy to be with you at this conference. I would have loved to be there in person, but I'm live from Stockholm in the Bonnier News headquarter building. And to steal a word from Kersti, I feel very humble to be a speaker here. Sustainability is not a science. It is, like Lars mentioned, a combination of several factors. And I am so happy that Lars actually asked me to present how Bonnier News is working with sustainability in our everyday operations. So that's what I'm going to do. I have some slides with me, so I will be sharing my screen. And I hope that what you see now is a screen. I'll just make it in presentation mode. There we are. Can you see a Bonnier News slide?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I just wanted to make a short introduction of the company I'm representing. It was a fantastic introduction you did, Gabriella. Bonnier News is, as you mentioned, the largest news media house in Sweden. And we are owned by the Bonnier family, well-known media publishers since 200 years. We are publishing morning papers, local newspapers, tabloids, business media, both in Sweden and also outside Sweden, with focus on the business media there. We have all in all around 7,000 employees, of which 5,000 is in the distribution business. So apart from that, we publish newspapers, we also print, and we also own companies that distribute them. Okay. Now we should have a shift here. Oh, nothing's happening. There we are. Everything starts with our vision. This is a vision that we in the executive management group put together 1.5 years ago. We believe in the freedom of speech and in contributing to a democratic, sustainable and inclusive society. And the keyword sustainable here was very automatically mentioned when we were about to create this vision. So this is really a strong signal internally for us that what we do is, besides the democratic factor, of course, sustainable. This is the strategy that we have put out. We have it from 4 angles, and all of these angles and focus areas are connected to the 17 global goals for sustainable development. First, we have freedom of speech, defending the independent journalism, like Lars talked about. Then we have the environmental part, which he also mentioned, which for us is about continuously reducing our climate footprint. Then we have the business ethics, ensuring a sustainable growth. I will come back to these focus areas. And we have equality and inclusion, both in our corporate culture and in our products. Usually when I show this slide, I put together the climate coverage that we do in all our newspapers. But given the situation in the world and the invasion of Ukraine, it feels very natural to instead put together a part of the coverage that we have been doing on the war. In the middle of this slide, you can see our headquarters. It says Expressen on it. And the day of the invasion, we lit up the skyscraper in blue and yellow. And this was actually a thing because our headquarters is just opposite the Russian embassy in Stockholm. But the point with this slide is that the most important footprint that we do is our journalism. We are keeping tracks of the other focus areas, of course, but this is why we go to work. This is the DNA that makes us tick. And this is the most important contribution we can do in society. When it comes to the ethics, sustainable profitability and sustainable business models is, of course, key. A couple of years ago, there was a kind of crisis, I would say, when it comes to the Swedish local newspapers. They were pressured by decreasing advertising. There were not sustainable business models. And when we, as Bonnier News, acquired a company called Mitt Media, some of you know this, everybody said that we were crazy. Today, this company and the newspapers are making money. We have successfully converted at least many of the readers to digital consumption. And me and my equivalents that are working with sustainability in Nordic companies have, of course, a great foundation to work from, since Nordic populations are consuming a lot of media. And we have also learned that there is a will to pay for digital content and for quality journalism. In this focus area, we also have handling of the data. We have updated code of conducts with environmental conditions, of course, that we work actively with. We follow the sustainability taxonomy, which is a lecture of its own. And we are much looking forward to see how the companies and the media companies of the world will be reporting in a standard way. When it comes to equality and inclusion, we address this from 3 different aspects. First of all, in our journalism, the world is very exciting at the moment. We want to reach more readers with more content. This means that we must have a diversity within our staff, within our newsrooms, within our cultures that enable us to contribute to reporting around an inclusive society. We are also working internally with these questions to become Sweden's most attractive workplace. And of course, this is a very important tool when it comes to the talent war, which is really happening now, I would say. Coming from Sweden, I have been working with gender equality for many, many years. And this has been a priority issue for many Swedish companies. We think that we have been doing quite a job here. We have a goal to have at least 40% of the underrepresented gender in boards and management groups. When it comes to the inclusion and diversity discussion, this has not been as vital in the Swedish society as the gender discussion. But we see that all Swedish companies now, also the Nordics, are really putting efforts to this, to be better and broader in gender, ethnicity, age, level of education, and social background. This is also a part of being able to work in a sustainable way. And then, last but not least, we have the environmental area. We are, of course, interested in behaving in the very best way that we can here, not least because we are investigating and covering companies that are putting a lot of resources into coping with the climate footprint now. Since we do have a lot of print when it comes to our newspapers mix, we have our largest footprint within printing and distribution. This means that alongside of the digital transformation of the media industry, we will see a decrease of our climate footprint. We have been taking actions in other fields as well. I mentioned here that we have a goal on fossil-free distribution transports in 2025. But the main thing here is to keep track of your printing and distribution and try to all the time have this aspect with us when we're discussing organizational changes and new business possibilities. We have nowadays KPI, which is really important for Bonnier News Management. It is the measurement of our climate footprint. And I just wanted to show you the oversight slide of this. As you see in the circle on the right, print is the crucial factor for us. After that, distribution. And I would say that in a couple of years, all companies will have to do this kind of coverage of its emissions. I think it's a very good way to actually get sustainability down in every aspect of the company. We have also quite recently committed to science-based targets, which we think is the best alternative to make sure that we really live like we are saying. We have committed to reduce our emissions with 55% by 2030. And as you see here, a lot of other international media companies have been committing to science-based targets as well. And this is also something that in a couple of years, I think that very, very many companies and also in the media will go for. So that is actually what I thought I would be presenting. I hope that you have gotten a view on how we work with this on a daily basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Lola.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a few follow-up questions. I'm sure people are interested in a lot of the topics you mentioned. Let me start with this. You mentioned 4 focus areas: freedom of speech, defending independent journalism, environment, continuously reducing our climate footprint, business ethics, ensuring a sustainable growth, and equality and inclusion, building the corporate culture. Do you think any of these 4 areas is more challenging than the other, or equally challenging, and why? Or you can give us your insights based on your experience so far.
Yes, that's a very good question. I think that all the focus areas are quite challenging, depending on where in the world you are operating. We have seen the last years how democracy has actually been put under pressure, and the freedom of media also. And this has, of course, meant to some of our colleagues around the world that it is not as easy, within quotes, to produce independent quality journalism. We are very fortunate that we are living in Sweden, where we have the prerequisites for this. But of course, this is the most challenging, I would say, when it comes to the global media industry. I would also lift the environmental questions, because we're not really used to it. Navigating in carbon emissions and EU taxonomies, it's not so very easy.
Thanks. I'm very interested in the aspect that you mentioned about diversity, equality, and inclusion. If you can give us some concrete examples of what are the steps you take, because I'm sure other smaller organizations can learn from your own experience. What are the steps you take to increase diversity in recruiting, in retention? What are some of the things you've been doing in the last few years to reach that goal of diversity in your staff?
Also a very good question. I would say that the most important thing with all the changes that you try to achieve is that it really comes from the top in the organization. We have owners, board of directors, and a CEO who are very...
Lotta, sorry, we cannot see you. Maybe you can stop screen sharing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
You see me now?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. The thing is that it must come from the top, I would say. We took a firm decision 2 years ago that we would address this in all our executive management groups. And for us, that meant that all the different newspapers and business areas and functions started with doing their lack analysis, like what competencies do we need, which would improve our ways to work, produce better journalism, be better at the tech game or whatever. And from that, all our different business areas and newspapers have been forming their own strategy. One of the newspapers might need broader perspectives in times of age. Another department might need broader perspective in terms of different social backgrounds. And I would say that this is not a quick fix. This takes time, of course, but I think that being aware of these questions is really, really important in all the steps that you do, whether it's in a newsroom, recruiting in a newsroom, or recruiting within tech or sales or so on. So I would say to increase awareness is the most important first step.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you.
So now we will move towards our next presenter. We are focusing on the gender perspective this time, so connected with the last question. So let me welcome Yemisi Akimbobola. She's an award-winning journalist, academic, consultant, and co-founder of African Women in Media. She holds a PhD in Media and Cultural Studies from Birmingham City University, where she's a senior lecturer and speaks regularly on issues related to gender and media. In 2021, she was recognized as one of the 100 most influential African women. So, welcome.
Thank you
Hello.
very much, Gabriela. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Lars, and all my fellow panelists here today. And we're here to talk about sustainable journalism. And I will start by saying that for journalism to adequately contribute to environmental challenges, it must be economically sustainable and socially supported. And such social sustainability speaks, amongst other things, to issues around press freedom, addressing critical issues of representation and one-sided narratives, and also the area that I'm particularly passionate about, which is gender equality in and through the media. And without adequate attention and commitment to change in addressing such inequalities among media workers and in media content, then journalism's social sustainability cannot be complete. My organization, African Women in Media, has operated for 6 years to create enabling environments for African women working in media industries, and also to support media to improve how media content represents African women. Our research into barriers faced by women journalists in sub-Saharan Africa, and also our second research that looks specifically at the experiences of women journalists in Rwanda, really highlighted to us how far we are yet to go when it comes to gender equality within journalism as an industry. And from this research, 5 broad themes emerged from our findings, which really speaks to this gendered experiences of women in media. The first was around job stagnation and gender pay gaps, which for a majority of the women who participated in our research often meant that they decided to leave the industry or to combine their work in a freelance format, so working freelance whilst also doing other communications roles. So this exodus of women journalists presents a significant consequence for journalism when it comes to the representation of voices. I have also had several conversations with women in industry in Africa who point out that because the media industry is struggling financially, most of the workforce are often employed on a freelance basis. So when you combine this industry financial instability with gender discrimination experienced by women, we see that there are many faces to this notion of gender pay gaps for women in media, and I will expand on this shortly. The second area that our research looked at was also the disparities between men and women in terms of distribution of job roles. And the research found dynamics of gendered role assignments and gendered allocation of resources in the newsroom that saw for our respondents that their male colleagues was being prioritized over them for what is considered the hard news of politics, finance, conflict, and so forth. And these are the topics that are really integral and essential to reporting sustainability crisis of the society. And our research also found that opportunities for continuous professional development through essential skills like training and attending conferences like this can also be gendered. And the impact of this from our perspective is that such environments of gender bias contribute not just to the marginalized positioning of women journalists in these African countries that we looked at, but the extent to which media does a good job of highlighting the gendered angles of media discourse on sustainability. The third area of the research also looked at issues around sexual harassment, bullying, sexism, and racial discrimination. And racial discrimination was particularly in the case of South Africa, where women do not only face biases because of their sex, but have also to grapple with racial inequalities in the newsroom, particularly when it comes to attaining leadership positions. And while the research focused on the African continent, there's ample research globally that looks at the multi-layer of discrimination experienced by women of color all over the world. But I will also return to this issue of sexual harassment in a moment. The fourth area theme that emerged from our research was also around family life and the societal position of women and how that plays out in media industries to impact opportunities for progression and retention of women journalists because of the lack of organizational policies and frameworks that truly considered these lived experiences of women journalists within the social constructs that they work. And the final area that the research showed was around the limited opportunities for media leadership for women. So for women to attain those leadership positions in the 17 African countries that made up the research, and for which all of these previously cited gendered experience come to play as part of the barriers to this leadership. Now, the full report is available at the Fojo website, on our website as well, but I want to expand on three really key areas today. So first, returning back to what I said earlier on about the gender pay gap. And often when we talk about the gender pay gap, we think of it in terms of the extent to which women and men on the same level earn the same, and often finding that women perhaps earn less than their male colleagues on the same job level. But what the research revealed to us was that things like the lack of transparency in progression opportunities, the lack of transparency in terms of job allocation, etc., play and lead to this gender pay gap as well. So for example, for our respondents, they felt that their male colleagues were often prioritized to go on training and conferencing programs, and which impacted opportunities to skill up, the potential to move up the ladder, and also therefore the potential for that salary increase. And I really want to stress the importance of looking at this many faces of gender pay gap. In some instances where I've presented this research, often the response has been, well, we have a standard salary scale. And really that's missing the point, because the question is, you may have a standard salary scale, but is the journey through that salary scale equal for men and women? And our research suggests that it's not. The second area I want to speak to is around sexual harassment, and which for the continental-wide research was the second most shared experience of our research respondents. But for our Rwanda research, that was the #1 shared experience. And this often related to things around sexual advancement by superiors and male colleagues. But there was also cases of sexual harassment by sources, during interviews, so by recruitment gatekeepers, leading to experiences of sexual harassment as a condition for work. And the various forms of sexual harassment ranged from suggestive propositions of a sexual relationship in exchange for work to online sexual harassment and even physical assault in some cases. And here again, experiences of sex for pay came up, namely the opportunity presents for those in decision-making positions to use sexual exploitation, otherwise known as extortion, as a weapon against low-paid women journalists who are desperate to make ends meet. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that sexual harassment was the #1 shared experience in Rwanda for our research in Rwanda. And Rwanda is particularly interesting because of where socially and politically there is a national gender policy and that global recognition of Rwanda in terms of its positioning in gender equality in the world. However, it has not been so successful in filtering down to the industry. So this national gender policy and parliamentary equality of women in representation in parliament is not necessarily filtered down to the industry. And so this is a prime example of the importance of this social sustainability we're talking about, and how without it, and in this case, in Rwanda, addressing social issues of gender equality within industry, then we cannot argue therefore that journalism social sustainability is complete if we don't have this wider addressing of gender equality and filtering it into the industry. So therefore, my final point today is that we have much work to do internally with media organizations and with women journalists themselves to understand what we mean by gender discrimination in media industries and the consequences at individual and organizational levels. And of course, how this ever-present danger is an integral component of any discussion around sustainable journalism. How can journalism be sustainable if we witness the same inequalities that impact environmental sustainability within journalism, if we witness the same barriers and marginalized of voices and the marginalizing of the contributions of women in newsroom, as we see in discourse on environment? So as we talk about sustainability of media business and the contribution of media to environmental sustainability, we must consider the gender perspective. And if we genuinely want to achieve sustainable journalism, then we also need to think about gender equality in and through the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Yemisi. I think it was a really packed speech and a lot of information. So let me ask you a few questions, and also everybody who is joining online, feel free to start adding your questions in the Q&A box, because then there will be time at the later on. We will start collecting the questions from Zoom, so please add it there. So Yemisi, I don't even know where to start, because there are so many areas that you mentioned, and I have a very similar experience to what you are saying. I coordinate and co-founded a group for women investigative journalists, and I can see, especially in Africa, so if there is a problem with women journalists in Africa, it's even worse, I think, for investigative journalism, which is in a lot of cases tougher and more difficult. So and you mentioned different areas. Where should we start to try to fix or address the problem? You mentioned pay gap, gender opportunities, lack of leadership roles. If there is any roadmap, should we try to fix it together? Or what can we do with this?
Well, I mean, I think what I'd like to give is an example of Rwanda. So, because I talked about Rwanda in the research.
If you can put your microphone, maybe.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right.
That's
so
better,
I think, yes, I was saying that I want to use Rwanda perhaps as an example of taking those first steps towards solutions, because I was in Rwanda 2 weeks ago presenting the research findings in the country to media managers, academics, and women in media themselves. And the outcome of that meeting was that the media managers across 17 media organizations in the country unanimously agreed to set up an independent committee on sexual harassment in the media. And the idea behind this committee was that it's an independent body that allows for a safe avenue through which women can report cases of sexual harassment, for example. So it was such an amazing moment where in the room there was that instant moment of awareness and understanding of the impact of this, and also the shock as to the extent of sexual harassment in the industry. But it was great to see all of the media organizations represented there commit to establishing this national committee as an independent body for women and men to report sexual harassment cases in the media. So I think it starts with awareness. Part of what Lota was saying earlier on is that awareness, and then also the kind of industry level and internal level actions towards addressing each one. And it's not something that's going to be done overnight. And one of the things we also discussed was developing a gender policy for all media in the country as well, which is something they're also eager to do. So at this stage with Rwanda, where we are at is that there is a steering group that will eventually set up the committee. And I think that model is something that we can easily replicate elsewhere. But it first of all starts with awareness and then that willingness to take action.
Thank you. When you heard about this initiative, what do you think a sustainable journalism partnership can bring to the table to try to solve? Do you have any concrete ideas? As this is starting tomorrow, the nonprofit, what do you think?
Well, I think one of the successes of it so far is the way in which it's kind of taking a global approach in of itself. So bringing people from all over the world to have the same conversation, and whilst also recognizing that the experiences are nuanced depending on where you are in the world as well. So I think having that global contribution to it, I think there's a lot of existing organizations that in their own way try to address a changing face in journalism. But I think the unique aspect of this is the way in which it's deliberate about the global perspective, and trying to have many voices involved in that, and also appreciating the differences in those experiences.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and for the great work your organization is doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So while you keep the questions coming on Zoom, let me present the next presenter. We have Alexandre Brute. He's the co-founder and director of Environmental Investigative Forum. He's an investigative journalist, mentor, and trainer specialized in cross-border collaboration and environmental issues. EIF enables quality science-based methods and investigative reporting skills to uncover environmental crime worldwide. So he has a slide, so we will look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be able to talk to you about EIF, the Environmental Investigative Forum. The point of this NGO is to connect globally, on a global scale, experts and journalists around environmental investigative reporting. So what is EIF? The point of EIF, and I think it fits to the definition of sustainable journalism model, at least in the way that we framed the concept that we are trying to bring up and the way that we are operating. We are a global nonprofit that's registered in France since 2020, so we are a pretty young nonprofit organization. And we also operate as a global consortium of environmental experts and investigative journalists that are, for now, based in North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, the Middle East region, the Western Balkans, and the EU. And the point for us is to design this and develop further this collaborative project that is designed to let new reporting tools emerging, as well as working frameworks and training materials that we can share and teach to other journalists. The concept that we're building up and that we're trying to reinforce that already exists, of course, is environmental investigative journalism. For us, we think we are a sustainable nonprofit organization because we address a systemic issue on a global scale that before wasn't really being addressed by an organization in particular. This concept you can see being talked about by many other organizations that we see as mentor organizations that we look up to, like the GIJN or Internews and the Earth Journalism Network, for example. But our idea was to strictly focus on environmental investigative journalism. So what is that? For us, we see that as borrowing from two or pre-existing fields of journalism, one that is really well known, investigative journalism, and the other one, climate journalism and eco-journalism. And what we think of as environmental investigative journalism would borrow from several tools and replicable frameworks from both of this and also merge them together. The basic definition for investigative journalism established by Mark Hunter in his manual, A Story-Based Inquiry, is to define investigative journalism as a deductive approach working with an hypothesis and a methodology and subsequent tools to validate this methodology. So it's a really scientific-based approach that you can see fits really well with the concept of eco-journalism that tends to use data visualization tools, geoinformatic system tools for visualization, sometimes for cross-referencing data, and also remote sensing analysis that is, I think, a concept, I mean, a method that is going to be more and more used by investigative journalists. And either they are going to learn how to use these techniques, or they are going to even hire some remote sensing expert. This is the practice of analyzing satellite imagery in order to detect or monitor some activity. It can be like gas emission or to monitor the development of an infrastructure. So for us, environmental investigative journalism, it's borrowing from this classical IG model that I talked about, this hypothesis-based approach. and using these emerging tools that are highly scientific. Also, we don't only connect these journalists who work on stories together, but we try to train other journalists to make them understand that if they make, let's say, a quick typology of what types of environmental investigation you can make, it's actually easily replicable across region and across countries. And most of the time, a journalist that has worked on a cross-border story before can replicate the same story on the extractive industry and its impact on another country, for example. So we try to make it easy for people to replicate these things. And this is the very simple typology that we came up with as types of environmental investigation you can develop and publish. Environmental corruption story, a story investigating environmental risk, environmental impact or falsification, and the top would be, I mean, in my sense, the best environmental investigative story would tick all of the boxes. It would be the most impactful. So I wanted to give you a few examples of what I mean, some more practical examples after this really theoretical overview of these types of stories that we develop. For environmental corruption, for instance, we had Aïda Delprech, who's a Tunisian-French journalist that worked with an Italian media in order to uncover a corruption network that was underlying beneath an environmental scandal about toxic waste traffic, illegal trafficking that was coming from Italy to Tunisia, her country. And as this environmental scandal was pretty well known, what she uncovered beneath was who were the enablers and who was allowing this traffic to happen and organizing it. And they saw that this was an actually really complex network that was involving a politically exposed person, but also members of the Italian mafia. So that's an example of a story about environmental corruption. A story about environmental risk, for example, would be this story that we developed with a remote sensing expert. This was about a wastewater spill that was happening on a lake in Bulgaria called Varna, the Varna Lake. And this was a wastewater station from the municipality that had broken down and hidden it from the public for the space of 10 months. And the municipality was answering to local journalists saying that there was not any potential impact that was linked to this wastewater spill. What we wanted to do was to double check if what the municipality was saying was correct or not. And we asked our remote sensing expert, sorry, can you try to measure the eutrophication level that connects with a sign of pollution in this lake? And she told us, yes, really easily. And she came up with this analysis that is represented in a really simple form, but that could contradict actually the narrative from the municipality. There is an impact actually, and they didn't publish any study on this catastrophe that was linked to the dissemination of millions of liters of wastewater every day for the space of several months. Another one about environmental impacts. This was one published by one of our members, Maïs Katz, about the environmental impact of the war in Syria. That's an article that was published really recently in May 2022. And what her team did was trying to find data about soil pollution linked to the presence of explosive all around the country. And they analyzed and they tried to quantify how this impacted the land and the agricultural fields in Syria. I told you also it can be about scientific falsification. You can see a bit of that in all of these stories, and even in the following one that I'm going to talk about. I also mentioned when a story can fit all of the above criteria. So we had this story about soil fracturing, about hydraulic fracturation, and a French company called Perenco that was fracking gas reservoir. So it means injecting high pressured water mixed with over 100 additives, which can really contaminate and pollute the aquifers that are lying close to this rock source that they want to break in order to get the gas. And this is a practice that's actually forbidden by law in Tunisia. And this is a story that we picked up and we wanted to see, because one Tunisian media already had demonstrated that they did it at least one time on a gas and oil concession. What we wanted to see is around 6 years later, are they still doing it? And actually on how many exploiting well are they doing it? And this started with remote sensing again. We were looking for fracking water ponds that we monitored and that we documented. Then we went on the field to see on the spot what was going on. And then when we documented actually all the well gas and all the fracking events that we could record and that had happened on this land. And then we also visualized what was the covered land and the environmental assets that could be exposed to this activity. We also took a long time investigating the offshore branches that were linked to the company that didn't have any office in Tunisia, which is actually illegal regarding corporate law. So in this story, we had again all of these elements at once: the fiscal aspect, the corruption aspect, the environmental risk impact, and the falsification, because they were saying they were doing conventional gas and oil, and they were not. Just a quick conclusion about this. I wanted to give this example to see how we talk a lot about climate journalism and actually reporting on the stories of the people and the consequences of climate change, which is obviously really important. Us, what we try to do is to bring up something new and establish ourselves to make the connection between climate reporting and classic investigative journalism and try to experiment new ways of reporting. We do this through connecting experts and journalists, as I said, training journalists, but we are also trying to develop investigative tools for environmental reporting based on what I think are really sustainable models for journalism tools, as the offshore leaks tools that you have on the ICIJ's website that followed up with the Panama Papers. I think journalists and media also need to come up with sustainable tools that people are going to use on a long term, and not simply a report that is going to have a wide impact, but build their own resources that are going to work on the long run. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this was a really packed presentation. I might have like a million questions, especially because it's very connected to what we do at GIJN, but let me just ask you a few. So when you talk about environmental investigative journalism, probably most of the examples that you show here are cross-border, right? Or transnational. What are the biggest challenges? I know it's not just one. Is it learning to use this tech or these things? Is affording these things? I'm sure sensors and these kind of things are not cheap. Is it finding the story? Is it getting the message across or having impact? Is it finding the right partner? Is it finding the audience? What do you think are the biggest challenges you face?
So me, on a personal level, I'm an investigative journalist and I work on my own reports, but I also do this NGO as a director on a volunteer basis. So I would say connecting all of these activities together, and it's easier to find funding for these investigative reports. I think we are constantly able to help journalists funding their stories and grant them funding really easily with existing freelance schemes. But I would say as an NGO, it's really hard to find our place and funding for activity for actually developing our own activity and supporting these journalists. And the main challenges about the technology, not really, because you can always bring up an expert that knows really well about that topic, and you ask them to translate their knowledge into working terms to the journalists, and you come up to the expert with a really clear question of an hypothesis you want to demonstrate that is not longer than 1 or 2 sentences, and usually it helps communicating around some clear goals to demonstrate.
Yeah. I mean, what you mentioned is something that I hear all the time from the community we work with at GIJN. This is very difficult to get funding or to make the case. What do you think this kind of sustainable journalism partnership can help organizations like yours? What is needed out there to make the case for more funding on investigative journalism?
What's most needed is to collaborate between organizations and not be in some kind of a competition when two organizations sound like they are doing the same thing, because climate journalism and environmental investigative journalism, it's not actually the same thing. And I think two organizations that would each do this could totally work well together. And so I think having a collaborative mindset and this joint partnership approach is super important in order to break this pattern of competition between NGOs and understand that it can benefit all of us to partner up and work. Yeah.
The issue is how we do it, right?
Yeah.
How we convince journalists sometimes it's not that easy. And also sometimes the problem is that there are so few opportunities of funding and that. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
And anyhow, we will have more questions and answers.
Thank you.
Later. So keep your questions. I know I could ask very little to each speaker, but please keep your questions coming and we will have enough time. So we are going to give you also a few greeting words from all the organizers of this event. So the first one will be me. So let's start again. I'm Gabriela Manudi. I'm the Deputy Director of the Global Investigative Journalism Network, GIJN. So what is GIJN? It's the largest global network of non-profit investigative journalism organizations. We currently have 227 member organizations in 88 countries, but we work with journalists everywhere, in non-profit and commercial organizations and with freelancers. We have an extensive range of resources and tip sheets to help journalists worldwide, and we organize big conferences that, thanks God, we can resume in person. Hopefully next year. We are planning our big global investigative journalism conference. You can find everything on our website. I've been working with GIJN for almost 10 years. It's going to be 10 next year. And before I was an investigative journalist myself, or I am, I think you never end being a journalist. And I know firsthand how much help is needed out there. And I know how hard it is for small organizations to try to keep afloat and fighting the good fight. So that's why I welcome these kind of initiatives. And in fact, I welcome any initiative that helps support quality journalism everywhere, especially in the midst of disinformation and attacks to the press and democracy. We don't run at GIJN, and in my all these years of experience, we don't run short of examples on how hard investigative journalists are trying to diversify, to keep afloat, to be sustainable. We can see a lot of innovative things organizations are doing in terms of sustainability and revenue, creating alternatives to support, for example, teaching, training, newsletter, podcast, events, micropayments, syndication and publishing partnerships, even blockchain and cryptocurrency, selling data, video production, fixing, and many, many more. It's very inspiring to see how hard are trying everywhere in the world. And on top of that, you have also great examples of membership and crowdfunding, which of course is no size fits all, and it's not for everywhere, but these two things show also how the audience wants to be involved and they want to support journalism. So it's really nice to gather today and later in the week in Stockholm and to see that a community committed to support journalism and investigative journalism. We need, as we were talking before, to really make the case to increase the pool of money that goes to support real journalism everywhere. We need to make the case, we need to be better at documenting impact and creating the opportunities, and to show how journalism contributes to democracy and the strength of civil society. So I welcome especially this opportunity where we are also thinking in interdisciplinary ways, without forgetting the impact on the environment and the gender angle. As I mentioned before, I co-founded GIJN Women. It's a group created to discuss issues related to the work of women identifying investigative journalists. So if anybody on Zoom or here want to join or know someone that would like to join, please contact me, send me an email or stop me at the coffee break. It's a really special time for this. Investigative journalism has historically been dominated by men, but we can see in the last decade how a growing number of women reporters have entered the field, leading to a wider range of issues being investigated. They dig into traditional topics, of course, like corruption and crime, but they are also investigating gender-related issues, discrimination, gender-based violence, healthcare and education, and bringing their own perspective. Yet women, as Yemisi was saying, face a very whole series of additional challenges because of their work, including online sexist attacks and harassment. So I really believe in the power of collaboration, in the power of small things. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all your ideas later today and later on the week. So thank you, and let's get to the next greeting with Melanie from WAN-INFRA. Melanie, hello.
Hi there. Hi, Gabriela.
Melanie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. You know, like the speakers before me, really just honored to be here, and it's so heartening to hear such similar held beliefs and views on these three really important tracks in support of sustainable journalism. I'm really delighted to be here representing WAN-INFRA. A little bit about WAN-INFRA. The World Association of Newspapers, or WAN-INFRA, is the global organization of the world's press. Our mission is to protect the rights of journalists and publishers around the world to operate independent media. We provide our members with expertise and services to innovate and prosper in a digital world and perform their crucial role in society. In total, we count as members more than 3,000 news publishing companies and technology entrepreneurs. We derive our legitimacy from 60 member publisher associations representing 18,000 publications in 120 countries. WAN-INFRA really, at its core, believes that media sustainability is a cornerstone of media freedom. You cannot have press freedom without economic independence within healthy, viable news media. This has been a driving force of our activism and media support work since our founding more than 70 years ago. We are also deeply committed to increasing equality in the media industry, recognizing that the absence of equal voices, opinion, and leadership in the news is in itself a stifling of press freedom. Gender equality, diversity, and inclusion are also business imperatives. We, finally, also like the rest of the world, increasingly recognize the urgency of environmental sustainability in business practices within our industry as another compelling piece of the overall picture of sustainability. It's for that reason that we are honored and pleased to have joined forces with Fojo Media Institute and our other colleagues here today to explore just what that means in practice and how we as an industry can collaborate with like-minded organizations to drive this change. And likewise, I very much look forward to the discussions that will ensue today and also in 2 days in Stockholm, where I'll be in person. So really just delighted to be here. Back to you, Gabriela, and I look forward to connecting with each one of you in person and online.
Thank you. We are waiting for you here in Sweden. So now let's go to Dinesh from Wits University. Welcome.
Thanks, Gabriela. This one. Are we good? Thanks, Gabby. Esteemed guests, colleagues, friends, both here in person and online. I'm Dinesh Balia, and I'm the Acting Director of the Wits Center for Journalism. It's my pleasure, really, quite frankly, to be in person joining you and representing the Wits Center for Journalism in Johannesburg, South Africa, for this momentous launch. The Wits Center for Journalism is home to a number of key journalism projects on the African continent, some of which you may know, including the Africa-China Project, the Wits Justice Project, the JamLam Innovation Hub, the Wits Radio Academy, and Africa Check. We also home to the largest investigative journalism conference on the continent, the African Investigative Journalism Conference. All of our projects are closely linked with our academic programs, and which is focused on postgraduate teaching and research. Growing quality journalism through all of our activities is really what is at the heart of our center. The Sustainable Journalism Partnership has been some years in the making, and I was chatting to Lars about that this morning. And we are so proud to be here to be part of this momentous moment. Wits University celebrates its 100th anniversary this year, and I cannot think of a better time to initiate this partnership. The Sustainable Journalism Partnership is a joining of hands across the globe towards a reimagining of journalism with sustainability at its core. This partnership brings together voices, new voices, ideas, and solutions towards a new kind of journalism. The Sustainable Journalism Partnership is the good news. In today's media and journalism environment beset by challenges from all sides, both within itself and society in general. We are at a point in our planet's history when bold action is required. And this partnership for sustainable journalism is exactly that. So we thank you for that, Lars, for this vision. Congratulations to all the partners in this initiative. The Wits Center for Journalism looks forward to walking this journey with you and with the many members still to come. Thanks, Gabby.
I'm all for hopeful and positive words, so thank you. And now we have a live greeting online. Guy Berger from UNESCO. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Hi,
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay,
welcome.
Super. Thank you so much. Greetings, everybody, and congratulations for the launch of the network. Some quick points from me, speaking from my position at UNESCO, where I'm a director in this area of media and journalism. Well, 2/3 of the world take it for granted that they have clean water, running water, but 1/3 can't take it for granted. That is several billion children, teenagers, adults, and elderly people. Imagine what that means for each person if you don't have clean water. How does journalism compare to this? Well, UNESCO issues a regular research report, which is called the World Trends in Freedom of Expression and Media Development. This report concluded that 4 of 5 of the world's population have experienced a decline in press freedom in their country over the past 5 years. 4 out of 5 experience a news drought. It's clear then that without press freedom, the kind of journalism that people get equates to water that is muddy and contaminated with very dangerous substances. But even where it exists, as Melanie has stressed a bit earlier, press freedom nowadays risks becoming a hollow shell because of the crisis in media's financial viability. So we have a village well with too little water for everyone. A small elite can import exotically flavored water in plastic bottles, but of course that is not a sustainable solution. Last year at UNESCO, the 193 member states endorsed what is called the Windhoek +30 Declaration on Information as a Public Good. For information as a public good, the world clearly needs both press freedom and media viability. And that's why the term sustainable journalism has at least three meanings. First of all, we can say that the term points us to journalism that shows clearly in its focus how it is an antidote to the spin and the infodemics that weaken or work against sustainable development. So sustainable journalism is journalism about sustainability in all its macro and micro dimensions. And second, the term sustainable journalism points us to finding sustainable ways whereby journalism can cover its costs and become more sustainable. And then finally, there's a third meaning, which entails an interlinkage. It's this: when journalism does foreground the prism of sustainability, it deepens its value to society. And in so doing, it can add fuel to public support for a free, independent, and viable media that delivers quality water to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us live from Zoom. And the next greeting will be Amrita from Internews Earth Journalism Network.
Can y'all hear me? Yeah, okay. So I wanted to thank you all very much. It's wonderful to be back in person and to meet so many of you. I am so thrilled and honored to represent Internews Earth Journalism Network and to be here, come all the way from New York. And so I just wanted to say how happy I am to be here for the launch of the Sustainable Journalism Partnership. And I wanted to share a little bit about Internews and EJN. So EJN is Internews' flagship environment program. And while Internews is celebrating its 40th year in media development, EJN was founded back in 2004. And ever since, from day one, our mission has been to enable journalists from developing countries to cover the environment more effectively. And a few years ago, I was one of those journalists who received a story grant from EJN. And it's precisely because as the environment and climate crisis is accelerating, we're seeing media resources are shrinking. And so it's extremely difficult for journalists, especially from low and middle income countries, to take on environmental stories. And these may be ambitious investigative stories. These could be collaborative stories, opportunities to cover climate summits, or even simply just to go out on the field and amplify underrepresented, marginalized voices, to go out on assignment and to tell what is actually the most important and urgent story of our time, which is the environment and the climate story. And so it's these journalists that EJN was founded to support, journalists who are finding themselves on the front lines of these crises and who are representing communities and audiences who are also on these front lines. So EJN's mission has been to try and bridge that gap and to support journalists. And we do this in many ways. This is story grants, as I mentioned, media grants, professional development and capacity building workshops, fellowships, providing resources, tip sheets, supporting the creation of local language, regional environmental news platforms. And we're now a truly global network of nearly 15,000 journalists working in virtually every region of the world. And it's clear to us that ever since we began, that we know the impact of strong environmental journalism to bring about change on the ground. We've seen the impact of constructive solutions journalism, and we've seen the power of networks. And so over and over again, what's proved to us is that the power of collaboration to achieve together is far, far more than what one journalist or one media outlet can achieve on their own. And that's why we're so excited to join forces with this global forum that's being launched, well, officially tomorrow, but today, informally. And we know our missions are deeply aligned with those of this initiative. And that's why we look forward to working together and to being hand in hand with this initiative as it grows, it strengthens, it evolves, and it includes more and more members from around the world. And so I want to say congratulations to all of the organizers, and not just the experts that we're hearing from today, but also the people who have worked to make this a reality from behind the scenes. And also to everyone joining us today online from wherever you are in the world. And I hope that we are all remaining believers in stubborn optimism. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me second the thank you to everybody that's working so hard to make this happen. So we have a video greeting now.
Sustainable production is one of the biggest things on planet Earth. Why is this important? It's important because you are now entering this really interesting and fantastic sustainable journalism project. And in journalism, what are the incentive structures here? It is we try to get the attention for people. And this attention war, trying to produce as much as possible, as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. And that has consequences. It's not good for the people who consume it. You are what you eat. It's not necessarily good for media itself. People turn their backs on traditional journalism, and it's not good for democracy. Is journalism part of the problem, and how do we become part of the solution? That's what we are working on to figure out with great partners around the world at Constructive Institute. I salute what you're trying to achieve now, and I think there's never been a greater need for sustainable journalism. Good luck with it.
So we are getting towards the Q&A, so get your question going. We are almost there. So now we will have the last greeting from the organizers. We have Ivana from the Global Forum for Media Development.
Thank you, Gabi. It's an
welcome.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Gabi. It's an honor to address all of you today on behalf of the Global Forum for Media Development. The Global Forum for Media Development, GFMD, is an international network of over 120 journalism support, media freedom, and media development organizations working in around 50 countries. GFMD was set up to promote, support, and highlight the importance of free, independent, pluralistic, and viable media and public interest journalism in the pursuit of democracy, human rights, and sustainable development. GFMD's vision is a world in which democracy, human rights, and sustainable development benefit from a pluralistic and informed public sphere underpinned by free, independent, and viable public interest media and journalism. There are several concepts that are very important for GFMD. One of them is diversity. GFMD embodies diversity and variety of media worldwide by ensuring a broad geographical spread of its membership, and by gaining a better understanding of the challenges faced by development actors in multiple environments. This serves to inform and enrich best practice models on a global level. We represent a broad cross-section of the international media development community, including a significant proportion of actors from the global south. Another concept that is very close to GFMD is collective action. And in that sense, GFMD values collective action, such as this action today. And despite vastly different organizational sizes of our members, geographic footprints, priorities, funding models, resources, and methodologies, our members understand they are stronger if they band together to promote common interests. GFMD therefore participates in many partnerships, coalitions, and groups, and values sustainable journalism partnership as opportunity to amplify efforts in developing multidimensional knowledge and approaches. One more concept that is very important, and we think we find in this sustainable journalism partnership is knowledge sharing. Our own International Media Policy and Advisory Center initiative was launched in 2021 as a collaborative learning and exchange project designed to bring together media development and journalism support groups, donors and funding organizations, and journalism and academic and research institutions. And finally, the concept that is very important to us and the activities that we focus on is fostering media sustainability and independence through policy development, advocacy, capacity building, and other forms of support. Looking into the definition and understanding of sustainability and viability among our members and practitioners, we see that most practitioners believe that viability goes beyond financial viability, and that it includes professional standards, editorial independence, and pluralism. In our recent meeting on media sustainability, a point was made that sustainability and press freedom are not separate issues. They're two sides of the same coin and two big themes for the media. We acknowledge the correlation between press freedom, media sustainability, and our ability to achieve all sustainable development goals and address major challenges that humanity faces. We welcome the chance to support the launch of the Sustainable Journalism Partnership as an avenue for addressing challenges of sustainability, developing knowledge and practice, defining new research and promoting dialogue and cooperation. Thank you so much, and I'll be joining you as well in Stockholm. Looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you. We are also waiting for you here with a warm hug. So let's go to the last two video greetings, and then we will jump right away with the question and answers.
Sustainable journalism is, for me at least, to be present in the local community where you live and to meet people, especially those that don't seek the attention. And at least for me, it's very important to walk outside of the desk and build relations to the people that are, for me, are so important to hear. So I think that's a democratical right, and so my advice to everybody is to walk out from the desk and stay outside, talk to people.
A democratic and sustainable society cannot do without free and reliable information. And even if the digital development has made it possible for everyone to express themselves in new ways, journalism still holds a position in the flow of information. In crisis, for example, most people turn to legacy media to find out what's going on. It is therefore gratifying to see that at least part of the media industry finally has found business models that seems sustainable also in the digital world.
Okay, now we are getting ready for the questions and answers. Okay. So
shall we start? We have a question from Florence Mwale from Malawi. She asks, many countries in Africa are still behind in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. What role do we, as journalists, have to play in order to turn things around through our stories?
Sure, I think I can take that one. So, you know, the critical role that journalists play generally is to make sure that society is aware of the things that we need to be aware of. And one of those things are the Sustainable Development Goals, which unfortunately has fallen off the radar in the last decade or so in terms of what we report on and how we talk about it. So I think that, you know, the short answer to that is to make sure that that becomes part of the mainstream agenda again, that we're talking about those issues, making sure that we understand where we're falling short, and covering them, even when our news editors are saying that they're not as sexy as some of the other things that we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Thanks.
If I could comment on that as well, I mean, I remember I used to be a journalist, and then I turned into a bureaucrat, and I think that's also the problem with the SDGs. We have to turn them into journalism and turn them into good journalistic stories, and that's not quite easy. We kind of end up with 1610 and 5.7 and everything. So we need really to see how can we make good stories, good journalism, because there's a lot of interesting material. And I don't think we should not only see them at top level, but we should also look at the implementation at local level, because they are implemented and you can use them at all levels. And if we do that as good journalists telling good stories, then I think that we can produce a lot of good stories related to the SDGs.
Is there anyone that would like to comment further on that question? And I have to add that if anyone from the room wants to ask questions, please feel free to do so. We have a microphone that could go around. Great.
So my question to Lars, why it is not network? Why is it partnership? Sustainable journalism partnership. Why it is not network?
I think that a partnership is much stronger than a network. A network can be not least a digital network where just everyone can be part of, but a partnership comes with a commitment, and I think that is what we need today. We need commitment from everyone. So that is why it's a partnership.
Thank you for that answer, Lars. I think we have another question in the room.
Thank you very much. My name is Kuzai Kwangwar. I have a question directed to Lars especially. I want to know what are some of the reservations that some stakeholders have about the concept about sustainable journalism. What are they saying, those who are doubtful about it, who don't believe in it at this stage? What are they saying? What are their reasons? What questions are they asking? I'm asking this question because it's one thing that you also want to make it understood in some parts of the world. I come from Africa, from Zimbabwe, and we are taking up the concept, and we need to be ready with some answers on some of the questions. So what are the key questions that people who've got reservations or stakeholders who've got reservations are asking? What are they saying? Thank you. And to okay.
Dinesh?
No, from
Alexandre?
Yes, Alexandre. In investigative journalism on environment, what is the level of cooperation from power or from authorities when you're engaging in such stories? Yeah, just want to know that. Thank you.
Could I start trying to answer that very difficult question? Because, I mean, in one way, the concept of sustainable journalism is quite simple. It's answering the two questions. How can we make journalism sustainable? And how can we make journalism contribute to a sustainable world? That's the kind of the foundation. But then each country, each context, each media company, each media organization is different. So we have to take this into consideration. So what is important in Zimbabwe may not be important for example, Bonnier News in Sweden, with a huge company. So we also need to have a flexible approach and not be too square, but really look at the needs. Where are the needs, and where are the sustainability challenges in each context? And that is where we have to find the solutions.
And, yeah, thank you. And to answer your question, I guess you could be well placed to answer to this as well. So, but yeah, of course, there's a major influence from officials or from governments into allowing some of these functions to happen, especially when we are talking to. For this example about Perenco in Tunisia, for example, they are going to participate to misspread the definition of what is non-conventional gas and oil by simply turning the law, or even sometimes the absence of law, in their own benefit to justify their own wrongdoings. Also, in some other cases, there's, especially on the African continent, you have a problem of police surveillance that spreads out in many countries, and that's extremely problematic and dangerous. And we since we're always working on a cross-border level with our partner, we're always taking great attention into trying to go around this problem that we might face, and especially that the local journalists might face. It's a never-ending problem with no perfect solution, but we're yeah, that's what we are being confronted to.
I am also encouraging our participants online, keynote speaker, panelists, partners, to unmute themselves if they want to add anything to the conversation, of course.
Thank you for very interesting presentations, and Greetings. I'm Ari Nyqvist from the Linnaeus University here in Kalmar. Do you think that sustainable journalism at all is possible without reconfiguring in any way, in some way at least, the news evaluations in the newsrooms of traditional legacy media? Do we need a reconfiguring of the normal classical news evaluations we have now? I mean, also in the journalistic perspectives of seeing realities outside the newsrooms.
Yeah, I can answer that. I try to answer. But I think there's a constant re-evaluation going on. And I've been doing journalism, well, I used to, at least, for almost 40 years. And of course, for instance, when we introduce gender into journalism, and that was a re-evaluation. Actually, even you can say when we introduced the concept of investigative journalism, that was also something new. So I think that the time has come now to also look at the sustainability challenges. And I think that we definitely need to rethink and reevaluate. For instance, it's not only breaking news. It's not only what happens tomorrow. It will happen tomorrow and the next generation. It's not only what happens in Kalmar. It's what happened in Kalmar and Ukraine and Dhaka and Nairobi and so on. So both geographically and in time, we need to rethink and what was the word you use? Kind of reprogram ourselves when it comes to evaluating news.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Yeah, I would agree that I think this reconfiguration is ongoing, and it's both in legacy media as well as small, scrappy nonprofits, independent sort of news agencies. And I think that, like, even say when I started out, there was no sort of climate desk, but we're starting to see that in the bigger newsrooms, The Guardian, New York Times, and we're starting to see environment-only investigation sort of networks and things like this. I don't think that this was something that we sort of saw mainstreamed even a decade ago. So I think, partnerships like these to bring the big and small along, I think that's necessary to constantly keep reconfiguring.
We have some more questions in the room.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Nonhlanhla Ngwenya. I know it's a tongue twister, but it's a very beautiful, exotic Ndebele Zulu name. But you can call me Lala. And I'm the programs coordinator and editor at Community Radio Harare in Harare. So basically, my questioning or my comments are going to be biased towards community broadcasting and community journalism and telling stories of marginalized women in particular, but marginalized stories in general. Okay, so my contribution and question is, how can sustainable journalism, what role rather can sustainable journalism play in ensuring the future of community broadcasting, community journalism, and community press freedom? And this is to do with the already alluded shrinking financial resources, not just in Africa, but all over the world when it comes to media. And how can we then make sure that we preserve and continue the gains that have been made so far in bringing gender balance in newsrooms? I know there's still so much to do, but there are certain gains that have been made in bringing gender balance in newsrooms. And now with the shrinking resources, what role can sustainable journalism play? And this is in the aspect of community broadcasting, because we are non-profit. And if ever we have to do advertisements, they have to be limited because of the nature of community broadcasting. Thank you.
Maybe is Yemisi still online? Maybe Yemisi could answer that question.
Yes, I'm online, but I didn't quite catch the question because the internet was breaking. I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the question, please?
Hi, Dr. Yemesi.
Hi.
Oh, okay. So my question is on what role sustainable journalism can play, or how can it ensure the gains that have been made in newsrooms when it comes to gender balance, considering the shrinking financial resources that media is facing generally? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, a very difficult question to answer as well. I think, like I said in my presentation, you know, I'm often, when I present the findings of our research, and that's usually the comeback, is that generally the industry is facing financial instability. And I think within that, whilst we look at different media models, we should also consider within that, what are the specific gendered experiences of women in the newsroom when it comes to pay gaps. And so that as we develop structures and policies, that those are kind of not left behind. One of the things that we've done in my organization, so we also have a non-profit newsroom called Awim News. And one of the things we've done is to partner with UNEP. And what we've been doing is, over the last 6 months, commissioning women journalists, training them on kind of solutions reporting of the environment, and also reporting gendered angle of the environment. And so it's kind of a combination of, we're economically empowering them because we're commissioning them and paying them to do the stories, but we're also building the capacity through training. So they go through a process of training on those two areas, approaches of reporting on the environment, but also we take kind of like a coaching approach as well. So in a way where we are addressing the issue of, you know, the economic empowerment and paying them to do their stories, but also building their capacity. I think being able to do both and, you know, support their skilling up and developing their skills at reporting the environment from different perspectives is seeing some results. So far we've worked with 43 journalists, women journalists across the continent, and is a model that we're looking at, well, how do we ourselves make ourselves sustainable whilst using those kind of models of both kind of commissioning stories, but also building the capacity of women journalists. So your question is a very good one, a very good one. And I think that's why we're here to have this conversation today. So hopefully what we've been doing is a good example for this to also replicate elsewhere.
Can I quickly add to that, just briefly? I also think, just as we think about sort of not losing the gains with sort of gender, we need to also widen our scope and think about non-binary journalists, whereas, you know, the room for those voices in the center, Indigenous journalists, Dalit journalists. So we need to think about that as we start to sort of move forward as well. And not just women and leadership in the newsroom, but I would also say women in the stories, right? So moving us along from looking at women as just victims of environmental damage or climate change, but also speaking to women as community leaders or experts or solution givers, and women with agency. So I think there are different perspectives to this gender question that we need to also broaden our own thinking and sort of realize that we need to bring more along as we go.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that notion of thinking about how women are already building resilience as one of the mechanisms through which we find solutions to gender issues in industry. And also the project that I was talking about in partnership with UNEP, we are very much looking at finding those women who are providing solutions to environmental issues and making sure that their stories are reported. But also within the industry, one of the core objectives of Awim News was that it was the platform through which women journalists report about themselves, because the media is very good at reporting about everybody else's challenges, but we're not very good at reporting about ourselves as well. So also thinking about how we can include narratives about the experiences of women in media as part of this conversation on sustainable journalism as well.
Absolutely. And how women consume news, like women as readers as well. There's a huge gender gap there. So that is something that we need to be thinking about too.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions in the room. There's only 5 minutes left. So I think those are going to be the last one, if I'm not mistaken. We are going to take them from the front rows.
Yes.
Just a bit of a logistical.
Should I? Yeah. Hi, Sophia Hultqvist from Fojo. And thanks for very, very interesting presentation. And it's very, very inspiring. But as always, I'm very interested in the actions. So what will the partnership, what will the NGO, maybe a day too early, but what will it do? What will happen now? What will be the actions?
While you are thinking about the answer, I would to add, because it was also almost the question that I was going to ask, because I would like everybody from the panelists would put together and think and talk about what will be the one thing that will be the most visible and tangible result in a year from now. Tomorrow the organization will be launched, and in a year we might meet again, online or offline, depending on a lot of factors. And what do you see? Do you foresee as the most tangible result or impact in a year from now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is a partnership, so I don't think we should expect anything to be served that we don't do together. So I think that everyone need to contribute to get good results. But I might have some things in my sleeve. And to answer your question, Oleg, I think what perhaps is most important is to continue to develop business models that are sustainable in all aspects. And we have seen some really good examples here from Bonnier News, but that is not applicable in Zimbabwe, for instance. So how do we make those models applicable in Zimbabwe? For instance, I think that's one thing that I really hope that we will see in 1 year's time. The other one is about journalistic reporting, and very much what I talked about. And I said I might be on deep water, and I think I am actually. But we really need to know more and understand more about the effects of journalism on sustainability issues, not least how people comprehend climate change and other sustainability changes. I think we are at a time of history where things are changing at a very rapid pace, and we need to keep up with that pace as journalists. So that's another thing that I really hope that in 1 year's time we will understand better how people react on news related to sustainability issues, and that based on that we can make good business decisions, and we can also make good editorial decisions.
Does anyone want to add something? I'm also thinking about our online participants. If not, we have a question online too. I don't know if we should take question online or in the room. We can take a question from the room, of course.
Thank you. My name is Akima Nalatifa. I am from Rwanda. I am chairperson of Pax Press. Pax Press is a networking of professional journalists. Now I am not talking about gender because there is some speaker who has taught that in Rwanda. But I have a question. When we talk about sustainability in social, in economy, in the environment, we think about audience. What we can do in order to keep in our audience. I said that because when we have a report about this kind of story, we don't have, we don't increase audience. So what we plan or what strategy can we take for keeping audience? Thank you.
I'd like to answer to this, if possible. I think that the most impactful collaborative investigations or projects that there have been in the past years, as are, for example, I mentioned it before, the Panama Papers, or some stories by the OCCRP, for example, in Europe. And I think that based on these two successes, we should really think towards tools or forms of reporting that people can interact with, and not only in a fancy way that you have a nice data visualization that works, but really to try to scratch your brain and get the tool that people are going to use on a long term on your media, to try to make your reporting and the content that you're creating really useful directly to the people. That could be a way to keep an engagement from audiences, I think.
I think sorry, it's going. I think one of the things we forget is that an audience relates to things that they identify with. So when it's a fracking story, and it's a fracking story pitched at a very high level, financial, political level, it has no relevance to a mom who's feeding her kids. But when you relate that to a water table being poisoned and that water coming out of a tap, it becomes different. And in that way, we're shifting people's minds about how those high level issues that seem, out of our realm is actually relevant to you on the ground. And one of the things that Nonhlanhla, thank you very much, was saying earlier was about women in the newsroom. And one of the ways in which we need to think about sustainability is making sure that people understand what that change means in the newsroom. And as a closing point, because I've been dwelling on this since you spoke, is to say that, changing that narrative isn't expensive. One of the things we tend to do when we think about sustainability is think that it's a very expensive exercise. And having those discussions and making sure that we have mechanisms in place to maintain the parity that we've achieved with the women journalists in the newsroom isn't an expensive exercise. It's a mindset shift, which is really available to all of us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Winzer, and I'm the International Program Coordinator for the Rwanda Media Program. I would like to come in on a comment that was raised about reconfiguring journalism. And I will talk specifically about the Rwanda Media Program. Apart from making media in Rwanda profitable, independent and professional, we are also making sure that in our daily reporting, are we having gender sensitivity and development at the back of our minds? This is what we are trying to do in Rwanda. And as we report, as we're writing news, socio-economic issues of our citizens, are they captured into what we are reporting? So that's reconfiguring what we are doing is key in making sure that we are capturing in sustainable journalism as we try to progress in whatever we do. So it's a long way, it's a steady way, but it requires a lot of sensitization from all corners of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone that would like to add anything to that? I think we should probably wrap up that Q&A session. So thank you so much for your very interesting question and for the very valuable insights from people both online and in person. Gabby, over to you.
Yeah, I moved here because I find this background really, really nice, and we didn't use it as much because I can't sit there anymore. I think after pandemic, I lost the habit of not doing this from the sofa. So thank you all for staying here till this point. Now it's where the action starts, online and in person. So for the 89 participants online, so let me start for online.